The telly splash is a good one. Sydney's true grit is the headline. Mobility data prepared for New South Wales's crisis cabinet shows Sydney's lockdown is keeping residents at home more effectively than Melbourne's draconian restrictions did at the height of their outbreak last year. The mobility tracking compiled by the New South Wales government rebuts attacks levelled by Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, who has offered unsolicited advice that Sydney needs a ring of steel to stop the virus. You know, Caleb, you and I have spoken about this ad nauseum over the last 12, 18 months, and that is the shameless, abhorrent way in which this particular pandemic has been politicised, and the pot shots being levelled at each other among premiers and state and territory leaders, particularly in the last 6 months. And you know the irony in all this, Caleb? You look at the polling figures that we're seeing coming out of Newspoll, coming out of Roy Morgan, coming out of Ipsos, and you know what? Guess who the Australian public are blaming for all this crap? Scott Morrison.
You're quite right. You're quite right. And look, you know, there is a certain level of blame that falls at the federal government's feet for the vaccine rollout, but it's ultimately been the choice of the states to go into these lockdowns, and the politicisation of these lockdowns has, as you say, ultimately been something the states have decided to do. And it, you know, in many cases it has been quite disgusting. This is not a joke. We're not simply talking about politics. We're talking about the livelihoods of small business owners. We're talking about the livelihoods of people who work in the arts, people who work in hospitality, who overwhelmingly are in casual positions, whose work relies on people coming through the door, and they don't have a source of income right now. Because either they've been in lockdown, they are in lockdown, or their capacity of the restaurants or whatever they work in has been reduced to 25%. So there are far fewer people coming through, which means they need far fewer staff working in these places. And a great example of this politicisation is the fact that right now I'm sitting in Victoria. Now, you know, I'm meant to be working for the Herald Sun. I was given a job at the Herald Sun. I was meant to have moved this week from the Advertiser in Adelaide to the Herald Sun in Melbourne, and my plan was to have moved from Adelaide to Melbourne yesterday in the car, and I would be sitting in Melbourne today. Now, we have not had a single case in Adelaide, or in South Australia for that matter, of unlinked transmission. We were in lockdown for 7 days, but there was not a single case of the virus that was not linked to an already existing case. We have not had a case at all for 2 days, and yet the border is still closed in Victoria to South Australia. We do not have any community transmission at all, but it is a very easy way for Victoria to prosecute the case to its own people, its government to prosecute the case to its own people, that we're taking a tough stance on other states. But it doesn't make sense from a health perspective, and it certainly doesn't make sense from a humanitarian perspective. But this is what leaders have been empowered to do because it looks good to their own people. And your own state, Gleeson, Queensland, has proven that this kind of hard borderline wins elections. And that's exactly what Dan Andrews is going for his state election next year. It's what Stephen Marshall is going for a state election in South Australia next year. They know this stuff works, but it is nothing more than fear-mongering.